Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, we're going to be analyzing the launch of 2 new podcasting services, Twitter banning political candidates, and a whole lot more, so go ahead and stick around. Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to episode 166 of the BSP. My name is Bandrew. This is what I says. Like always, there are timestamps in the show notes down below in case you want to skip around and save a couple of minutes. But if you got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire episode. If you do want a different version of the show, either audio or video, you can find that at bandrewsays.com. Or if you want other podcasts on the Geeks Rising podcast network, head over to geeksrising.com. Let's start by looking at one of the new podcast services that is just launching. And the first one we'll discuss is called Swoot. Sounds kind of like a rap lyric. Swoot, swoot! I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Regardless, what is Swoot going to be doing? What are they doing that's different? They're going to be solving the podcast discovery problem. Wow. How are they going to be doing this, Bandrew? They're going to be doing it by showing you what your friends are listening to. Of course, this does mean that your friends also have to abandon their current podcatcher and sign up for Swoot as well. But that's how they're going to solve it. Show you what your friends are listening to, just like Last.fm. Perfect! That's exactly what we've all been asking for and waiting for. A new app that requires you to abandon a very well-designed and well-thought-out podcatcher that you've been using for years to sign up for them so you can see what your friends, who probably won't abandon their app, and see what they're listening to. So you won't have any friends on this app, and you won't be getting any real recommendations. That's the problem I see with this. Last.fm is not a popular destination on the internet anymore, at least to my knowledge. I am not Alexa. Sorry, I just activated people's smart woman in a tube, but that's the website ranking thing. I'm not that, so I don't know with any certainty if Last.fm is popular, but I don't see this working very well or growing because people have their podcatchers that work really well. They have all their subscriptions in them, and they like them. I don't see myself ever leaving Overcast. It is an amazing and just very well-designed app. I believe it's Marco Arment who designed it. He's done phenomenal with that app. If I want to know what my friends are listening to, I'll just shoot them an email or talk to them and say, hey, what are you listening to? I don't need an app to tell me what they're listening to. Maybe I am just being a naysayer. Maybe I'm just being a curmudgeon. I have been known to be one of them. That's very possible. It's very possible that that's what I am doing. If it does pick up, it could potentially expose your show to new listeners, which would be great. Growing your listener base. Everybody loves that higher download number. Very cool. But I personally would not expect any kind of change to your downloads with the launch of this app. I do think that in all honesty and all joking aside, that new apps coming out like this is a good thing because it's rolling out new features and it's pushing podcasting forward as a whole. I just personally would not view this as something that's going to solve podcast discovery, and you shouldn't be expecting 1 million new downloads because now your friends can see what you're listening to. I would keep my expectations in check because it's not going to change the ecosystem or the environment overnight with millions of new listeners. Not going to happen. Now let's talk about the second podcast app that launched this last week, and they are called Luminary. If you're in podcasting, chances are you've heard this name because they did a big ol' oopsie, or multiple oopsie-doopsies actually, and they have gotten a lot of backlash. Let's talk about what they are. The first one is they were running their shows or serving shows running through a proxy server. What does that mean? That's so confusing. I don't get what that means. I'm a dope. I don't know all the tech stuff. Let me try to explain it though. What that means is that when you requested to download a show through the Luminary podcast app, it would send that request through their server. What that means is that your podcast host, whether it be Libsyn or Blueberry or Spreaker, they would see multiple downloads coming from a single IP address or just a few IP addresses. Then those podcast apps would have to discard all of those plays. This is according to Marco Arment. They would have to discard all of those plays because that is viewed as bot traffic. When these companies see multiple downloads coming from a single or just a couple IP addresses, to them, they interpret that as you trying to boost your downloads by paying some kind of third-party service to run a bot and constantly re-download your show. So they have to discard all of those, I believe, if they want to remain IAB compliant. That's why it's bad. It's killing your download stats if there are multiple people downloading your show from the Luminary app. But not only are you losing out on those tasty downloads, but you're also missing out on that tasty, extra tasty listener data from their location to their phone type to what operating system they're running. All of that information is lost because it's being funneled through Luminary's proxy servers. Luminary has that information, but you don't. But let me go ahead and put your minds at ease right now. Luminary came out and said that they are working on fixing, or actually that they have rolled out fixes for iOS and Android, and they're working on fixes for their web player. So do not worry, panties, unbunch, you're in the clear, you're getting your tasty downloads, you're getting your tasty listener data, they have fixed it. Don't freak out. Problem solved. The second reason people got really upset with Luminary is that they were apparently not distributing all the show notes, which sometimes can contain donation links through PayPal or Patreon, as well as advertiser links that has tracking IDs within it. If an advertiser puts an ad on the Bandrew Says podcast, they may say, here, put this link in your show notes, and every time somebody clicks that, that advertiser knows this is a click from the Bandrew Says podcast. So the loss of that information is really detrimental to a show if they have advertisers or if they have donation links. This directly negatively impacts you monetarily. That's where people get really upset, when you attack their wallets or when you take away their tasty data, their tasty downloads. I am almost certain that this is probably going to be an easy fix, and they are going to fix it very quickly if it has not already been resolved. I don't have the Luminary app on my phone, so I can't be certain, but I imagine that's one of the first things they would fix. Now, the reason that people got angry at Luminary doesn't seem to be just because this was occurring, but rather because this was occurring without your permission. They were going in and pulling in all podcasts in podcast directories without you opting in. Spotify has very similar practices. They will rehost your content, and you have to get your podcast data, all your stats, through a different dashboard in your podcast host. That is very different, though, because by submitting to Spotify, you are essentially agreeing to their terms of service. Luminary was bypassing that process. They were just automatically putting you in their service without asking for your permission or without you giving your permission. I also saw an argument out there that Luminary is making money off of our shows, and we're not getting any of that money. Give us our money, give us our stats, and give us our data. We want all of it. If they're not hosting our content, I highly doubt that they're able to include dynamic ads in our shows, so I don't think that they're earning money off of dynamic ad insertion. I don't think that's a possibility. They 100% do have ads in their Luminary originals, and you can remove those ads by paying $8 a month to be part of Luminary Premium or whatever the heck they're calling it. So that is where they seem to be making their money. And I actually have a problem with that argument because the same thing could be extended to Spotify, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. You either have an upfront cost for the app, a monthly subscription, or a premium service. If that premium service is not being used to directly remove ads from our shows, what's the problem? We're not getting money from Overcast or Pocket Casts or Spotify. So why are we so upset with Luminary? Because they have a separate premium service where they pay $8 to remove ads from their exclusive shows. It makes absolutely no sense to me. I just don't think that this stuff really affects any of us right now. It's just another podcast app that had some way of getting $100 million of investment, and maybe a podcast bubble is going to burst real soon, pushing out all these huge investors when they realize, hey, it's very difficult to invest $100 million in podcasting and recoup that investment. I don't think this is going to last much longer. I'm not saying podcast is dying. Podcasting is going to be around forever, in my opinion. It's just maybe going to push out all these really big investors. I don't think we have anything to be angry about with Luminary anymore. It's just another podcast player, podcatcher, whatever you want to call it. That's it for that news. Now, let's jump to some controversial news. Twitter banning Carl Benjamin and Tommy Robinson's campaign accounts. Both of these people are very controversial figures who have previously had their personal accounts on Twitter banned. Now, the thing to note here is that both of these figures have begun running for office in the EU, and their campaign accounts have been removed. Not their personal accounts, not accounts that they have been running. Their campaign accounts have been removed. And according to Mark DiStefano, who works for BuzzFeed News, he posted on Twitter, Twitter has suspended the EU election campaign accounts of Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson, and Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, both who have been banned, who were trying to loophole the platform. It seems what Mark's trying to say here is that since Carl and Tommy had their personal accounts banned, that would mean that they are not allowed to have any accounts on the Twitter platform. They can't have access to them, they can't post, they can't do anything. And what he's implying is that Carl and Tommy were actually running these accounts, or they at least had access to these accounts, which would break Twitter's terms of service. I think that's a little bit misleading because we don't know if that's true or not. All we know is that these accounts have been suspended, and in previous years, they had accounts, personal accounts, that had been banned. That's all we can say for certain. We don't know exactly why Twitter banned them. But now let's go ahead and jump back a couple of years. In 2017, while people were discussing banning Donald Trump, Jack Dorsey told NBC, "I believe it's really important to hear directly from our leadership. I believe it's really important to hold him accountable. And I believe it's really important to have these conversations out in the open rather than have them behind closed doors." And I must say that I agree completely with what Jack said here. It's important to know what our leadership or what our potential leadership has to say about certain topic areas. And that includes people who are running for office. But apparently, Twitter doesn't agree with me there. Apparently, Twitter doesn't think that's important to see what our candidates are saying. Maybe not our candidates, I'm not in the EU, but you get the point. Apparently, Twitter does think it's okay to ban certain candidates, though, and remove access to their platform, even though they are potential leadership, and it would be rather important to know what each of these individual stances are on certain topics. But now, people don't know. People don't know what their stances are because they don't have access to their platform. It will be really interesting to see what Twitter does, though, if Carl or Tommy win the election, because now they're part of the leadership. Will their accounts be reinstated at that point? We'll have to wait and see. Been a while since I've said that. And now let's wrap this up in a pretty little bow and talk about what you can do with this information. I don't think that this affects you right now as a content creator. It just doesn't. But this does show us that Twitter has inconsistencies in its enforcement of its terms of service. They seemingly will ban campaign accounts of people running for office because they've said hateful things in the past, but they won't ban people in positions of power for saying bad things. See Louis Farrakhan. Look at his Twitter feed. See all the anti-Semitic stuff he said, very hateful things, but he is still on the platform because he's in a position of power. Seems a bit interesting to me. So all I can really say is that I don't think you should be relying too heavily on Twitter for any of your business income or your business traffic. This would be like working at a company that has rules in place and you can break them, but you don't know if you're going to get fired or not. And those rules can change at any time. I'm not saying get off Twitter because I absolutely love Twitter. It's probably my favorite social media platform. But I am saying that if you're relying too heavily on Twitter for your revenue stream, you really need to consider moving it off of there or at least diversifying your revenue stream a little bit more so you don't risk losing everything if Twitter decides that your tweet from 5 or 6 or 10 years ago is a little bit too offensive and you lose your account. Now, I understand that this entire story is a very touchy subject and a very complicated subject because there's politics, there's business, there's people in power, there's hate speech, there's a lot going on here. So it's a very touchy subject. So I want to go ahead and pose a question to you, or a couple. First off, Do you have any revenue streams that rely on Twitter? And if so, are you concerned with their inconsistent enforcement of their rules? Do you think that Twitter has an obligation to allow political candidates a platform? That would include people who are not actually in a position of power, but they are a potential person for a position of power? Or do you think they only have an obligation to ensure that platform once someone is in office? And do you think this could be considered a form of election meddling? Heavy topic, heavy questions. Would love to hear from you. I will go ahead and link a couple of articles in the show notes down below in case you want to do a little more reading. And that is it for the news, so let's jump to what I have been testing, and you have been listening to it this entire episode. That's right, it's a new run for a new microphone, and we are using a condenser again. I am committing blasphemy. This is the third time in a row, the third mic that I'm running on this show that's a condenser microphone. This is the Neumann KMS105. It is a stage performance condenser though, so it should do a very good job at rejection of ambient noise and reverb. First thing I noticed, very crisp up top. Very, very crisp up top. It's an interesting sounding microphone. I would love to hear from you in the comments and on Twitter though. What do you think of this initially? This is the first run. I will not be doing any EQ to it, but I will be doing any kind of compression, de-essing, that kind of stuff. So I won't EQ anything out of it. Let me know what you think of it. Now let's jump to what you had to say. And the first comment comes from, I don't want a channel, I'm just commenting. He says, if we're protecting gullible people, then we should ban the lottery. I don't want a channel, I'm just commenting. Very interesting topic. And I did already reply to you in the comments, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more in the show. If anybody's confused, this is in response to last week's comment regarding banning anti-vaxxers because that could have a direct physical negative impact on somebody. Saying don't get vaccines, that could lead to physical harm. I do think that the lottery is a waste. When I was studying finance, all of my professors didn't refer to it as the lottery, they referred to it as the idiot's tax, because that's what it is. The odds are so against you that it's ridiculous to throw your money at it, just hoping, oh, this is going to change everything. It's a waste of money. So I do agree. It's a waste and it's terrible, and I would be okay if it disappeared. But I would not be okay if it got banned. There's a very big difference there. Last week, we were discussing the protection of gullible people by banning anti-vaxxers, and I made the argument that we would also have to ban alternative medicine practitioners and religions that won't allow for treatment. And we would have to ban them because all of those could lead directly to physical harm. All of those have a physical impact on you. The lottery, on the other hand, would only cause financial harm. And if we're attempting to stop people from services that cause financial harm, you better get ready to ban payday loans, credit cards, and certain trading practices. But what if there are some people who use these services responsibly? Should those people still be allowed to access credit cards and maybe short selling and all sorts of fun trading stuff that could be very detrimental and cause significant financial harm? And if this is the case, how would you determine who's using these services responsibly? Does a regulatory agency now have to review all of your financial history and transactions to determine if you are smart enough to be able to use your money how you want? Is that what's going to happen? That seems dangerous. You know what? You have a lot of money, but you're too stupid to use it how you want. We're not going to let you do it. I don't like this world that we're creating here. I think you raised a really interesting topic here, and we could pull at this thread all day long. I'll just end by saying, I think that people should have the freedom to believe whatever the heck they want, whether it be believing in anti-vax or believing that you can't get medical help, or spending their money however they want. And that would include paying an idiot's tax by buying a lottery ticket or buying hundreds of dollars of lottery tickets. It's up to them how they want to seek medical attention, how they want to approach vaccinations, whether they don't, or how they want to spend their money. Good comment, interesting topic, and I appreciate you. Now, we got some great responses to the question of what would happen if the internet went down forever. The first comes from Second Time Tech. He says, "Hi, Bandrew. Another great video /podcast. Internet gone then. They'd have to go back to over-the-air radio and TV news and entertainment. Stores would be brick and mortar or over the phone with catalogs you get in the mail, and shipments of products would be the same as it is now. It would take a little time to go back in time to those practices, but they did work before. As far as friends, snail mail and long-distance phone calls. Can you tell I'm a senior? Second-time tech, I think you are likely right. I remember back in the day getting mail order catalogs. You'd have to call in to order, or you would have to send back an order form with a check, and it would take months to get the thing that you ordered. It kind of sucked, but it had its charm. You didn't have tracking numbers, you couldn't find out when it was coming, so every day you would come back from school or come back from work and be excited. Oh my God, is it here yet? Is it here yet? It was like Christmas, because although Christmas, you know when it's going to happen, so it's a little bit different, but it does have its charm. I like the way you think, second time tech. Next comes from Tech Leathercraft. He says, hate to say this, but if the internet permanently went out, I think people would lose their ever-living mind. No internet, no smartphones, etc. I think would lead to people turning a bad situation to a catastrophic situation. Guns and machetes and Mad Max post-apocalyptic style behavior. Perhaps I'm not giving humans enough credit, but the bad news is microphone and sound quality would probably only matter to TV, broadcast, radio, FM, or ham operators, which is basically the only thing that might be left for mass media consumption, if those don't get burned down. Of course, we still may have dial-up, or is that cheating? Tech Leather Craft, interesting point. Would we still have dial-up in this? I do like that loophole, because I don't think that would be considered modern internet. It's kind of just making a phone call with a computer, right? Would that still be considered internet? And if we do have dial-up, I think that would potentially blow up podcasts a little bit more. Of course, we would have to encode at much lower bit rates to accommodate for the lower download speed, but I think that would be a great, environment for podcasts to really thrive in. On another note, I don't think that audio gear would completely fall off because there would still be bands looking to record at home and save a bunch of money. And I like to think that there would still be podcast-style content that's maybe put on CDs or flash drives, and those could be ordered through mail-order catalogs or through dial-up internet, or you could just download it over dial-up internet. But I think there would still be a need for audio gear reviewers, or maybe I could just go try to work for a microphone company or an audio gear company. I could do that, go to some trade shows and yell at people from a booth. I could be a booth babe, right? I'm a booth babe. I'm an audio gear booth babe. Hire me, please. I need a job in this world. Next comment comes from Lyowan. He says, I lived for almost 20 years without the internet, so I think I would be fine. Of course, I am an introvert, so I wouldn't need to go out and make friends. In fact, I would most likely just go fishing. Lyowan, you get it. You get it 100%. I would finally have an excuse to go live in a cabin in the woods, but it would be impossible for me to do my current job, living in a cabin in the woods. Currently, there's a possibility of that being okay because telecommuting is a thing. I think the death of the internet would kill telecommuting. Pretty obvious. It would kill telecommuting, and I think it would have a direct negative impact on entrepreneurship because a lot of new companies are based on the internet, and it would probably become significantly more expensive to run those businesses if you could only hire from a very select pool. I think that's what would happen, but I like the way you think. Just, okay, we're going fishing. Interesting take on it, Lyowan. Appreciate you. And the last input comes from Peace May Benot. Sorry, I mispronounced that. If the internet just stopped existing, I would probably convert to visiting the local library a bunch and read a lot of books. I'd probably also go to the local game shop and look for more D&D friends than the couple that I already have, but I definitely wouldn't be happy about it. Edit. Quick, Bandrew, name other singers besides Taylor Swift. Nope, I got nothing. Okay, Peace, fine. Frank Sinatra. Eddie Van Halen. That's not a singer. I've already failed. I'm sorry. I got a second one, Frank Sinatra. Come back at me next week. I'll have another singer for you. That's a good choice, though. Game shops are a lot of fun. I have gone to a bunch. I played some role-playing games, all of that stuff. Really cool environment. Comic book shops, another great place. Libraries, lots of fun. Free media. I don't know why we don't use libraries, a lot more. You can rent DVDs for free. How cool is that? All of it. I think it would be an interesting time if the internet completely disappeared. It was really interesting hearing from all of you and seeing how you would adopt or adapt to an environment that didn't have the internet. That was a fun thing, and I appreciate hearing all of your inputs. Now let's jump to my favorite part of the show, the Ask Bandrew segment. All right. If y'all got any questions, go ahead and send them to askbandrew@gmail.com, and I will likely answer them on an upcoming episode of the podcast. Don't forget, you can send in audio and you can send in video if you want to avoid listening to me read. I appreciate it, and your ears will appreciate not listening to that. First email comes from Logan. He says, I wanted to follow up with your frustration of the ever-growing a la carte and proprietary subscription services. If my memory serves, I believe many moons ago, back before everyone and their grandma had their own sub-service, you voiced excitement and were looking forward to this type of service and how it could be such a great thing, like building your own menu of content. So how do you feel now? And do you believe we will eventually revert back to cable and satellite? Thanks for all the great content and fun podcast. Bye! Logan, thank you very much for the email. If you don't know, Logan is the host of On the Subject and Conversations with Creators podcasts on the Geeks Rising podcast network. Find out more at geeksrising.com. Shameless plug. I feel a lot of shame for that. I apologize. Great question though, Logan. And I think I've covered this since you sent in this email, so I won't spend too much time here, but I am sick of the level of content that has become compartmentalized, I guess. It's all in its own little bucket, and if you want all of it, you have to buy all of it. I don't know if we will revert back to cable. I think people will just become more selective, and people will just come to terms with the fact that you can't go to the water cooler and talk about the latest episode of show X, Y, or Z because not everybody has it. I've talked about this a lot. I've personally just reverted back to physical media. I prefer that so much more over streaming stuff. The only streaming service I actively use now is Shudder, and that is still very rare. I will maybe occasionally watch a Netflix thing, or right now actually HBO because of Game of Thrones. But I don't know if we'll revert back to cable. A couple weeks ago, and when I say we, I mean a couple of people in my Discord voice chat, we were trying to find out if it would be cheaper to sub to all these subscription services or just pay for cable. And it does seem like it still would be cheaper to sub to Netflix, Hulu, Shudder, and maybe YouTube TV. It still would be cheaper than the standard cable price, but it makes it more difficult to consume it as well. There's also that added hurdle to overcome. But appreciate the question. I don't have a good answer for you. Next email comes from Luke. He says, hello, Mr. Handsome. Agree to disagree, Luke, but I appreciate that. With the recent announcement of the iCard, the Apple credit card partnership with Goldman Sachs, do you think this is a ploy, a con, a ruse for Goldie to get information on iCard customers when their partnership with Apple ends? Because surely it would have some end date. Goldie will have some nice juicy info on iCard customers. They can then use this information and then offer these people Goldman Sachs credit cards. It's a power play for Goldman Sachs to get into retail consumer banking. Then they would be in a similar place to JP Morgan and Chase. JP Morgan are the investment bank and Chase are the retail consumer bank. Goldman for the investing, SAC for the retail banking. Regards, Luke, who's talking. Luke, thank you very much for the email. I appreciate the financial question. I'm a finance nerd, kind of. Not too deep into it anymore. I haven't used my degree in years. But if you don't know, Luke is the host of the Luke Who's Talking podcast, which is a storytime podcast. A lot of fun listening to him with his cute little Aussie accent talk about stuff. Appreciate the email, Luke. Let's get into this. Do I think that Goldman Sachs is having a go at us? I wish I could go to the conspiracy corner, but no, I don't. I do not think that this is a ploy. of Goldman Sachs to get into retail banking and steal all of our information, as much as I would love to go to the conspiracy corner and go deep on this. I don't think that's the case. With how popular Apple is, I just think that Goldman Sachs noticed how much money there is to be earned off the people who are so committed to using Apple and are locked into the Apple ecosystem. And when they see an Apple credit card, they would automatically say, yes, I want the Apple credit card. I don't care what it costs. I don't care about late fees. I don't care about the interest rate or anything. I just want that Apple credit card. I think that's why they went into business with Apple. The moment that it becomes apparent that Goldman Sachs is using this data for nefarious reasons, Apple would have to sever ties, because Apple has built their brand over the last couple of years on privacy and security, and that would be a huge scandal and erode a bunch of trust in the Apple brand, and Apple will not stand for that. So if Goldman Sachs was doing this, they would lose all that tasty interest money from all the Apple sheep buying that card because it has an Apple logo. And people who are Apple sheep are a little bit less frugal with their spending. They are premium customers, I guess you could say, because the Apple iPhone is a premium product and they're more willing to spend recklessly, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. So Goldman Sachs realizes that and says, well, we can make a lot of money off of that, charging interest on that reckless spending or those people that have more disposable income. Let's get to that. I think that's what it's really all about, not them trying to get into retail banking and steal all this information. That would ruin them if they did that. Last email comes from Mr. X. YouTube giveaways. Let's actually jump to the conspiracy corner for this one. Nice to be in here. Nice and dark and dusty. I need to get a house cleaner for the conspiracy corner. Anyways, the last email from Mr. X. YouTube giveaways. Keysight Technology announcers 2019 Wave giveaway. First, February 6th, 2019. Great Scott, location Germany, was giving away 4 Keysight DSOX 1204G digital oscilloscopes costing around $2,000 USD on their YouTube channel, but never says how they got the scopes. They did mention the Keysight 2019 giveaway, but never said they got the scopes from Keysight to give away. Second, March 4th, 2019, EEV blog, location Australia. Dave was giving away 5 Keysight DSOX 1204G digital oscilloscopes, which just happened to be the same model as Great Scott was giving away 1 month earlier. Only Dave says that he found the $2,000 USD scopes in the dumpster. So Dave found 5 brand new, totaling around $10,000 USD in the trash, and that he would be giving them away to his followers. I have not found any YouTubers here in the US that have had any giveaways that looks like they may have come from Keysight. I truly believe that Keysight sent this equipment to these YouTubers. There may be more with explicit instructions not to tell or say where the scopes came from. I know you talk about giveaways, and Bandrew says, episode 159, it's in my notes. So my question is, can they be breaking any of YouTube's terms of service by not disclosing that they were receiving the equipment from Keysight to give away on their YouTube channels? For security reasons, I am Mr. X, and I love your show. Keep up the great work. Also, don't want you or your channel to get into any trouble by disclosing any of this information. You can watch the videos yourself. Thanks. Mr. X, you know I'm all about them conspiracies, and I appreciate you bringing me in on this one. I have linked YouTube's ad guidelines in the show notes down below, and they specifically state, you may include paid product placements, endorsements, or other content that requires disclosure to viewers in your video content. If you do, we require that you notify YouTube by checking the video contains paid promotion box in your advanced settings using the instructions below. All paid promotion needs to conform to our ad policies. In addition, creators and brands are responsible for understanding and complying with their legal obligations to disclose paid promotion in their content, including when and how to disclose and to whom to disclose. So be sure to check and comply with your legal obligations. My God, my voice is completely shot and it is going by the minute. Yes, I do think that they would be required to disclose this was provided to us by Company X for the sake of doing this giveaway. I think that would qualify as a sponsorship because the company is essentially paying X dollars, X equaling whatever the price of that product is, to get you to talk about their product on your channel. In my eyes, that's sponsorship. So in YouTube's guidelines, they are violating the terms of service, but also there is going to be local governmental requirements to disclose this type of ad deal. That's why in my videos on Podcastage, you will see me saying, I received this free of charge, or I received this at a discount, because that is the FTC regulation. You have to disclose that. And if you don't follow those regulations and those rules, you can face some pretty hefty fines. So if these YouTubers did in fact receive this stuff free of charge from the company to promote their products on their channel, and they did not disclose it, I would say that is in violation of YouTube's terms of service. Not sure about their local government regulations. I don't know where they're from, their cities or anything, but I would say YouTube, yes. Let's get out of the conspiracy corner. Thanks for including me in that one. That was fun. And that is going to wrap up this week's episode. Sorry about my voice. I need to drink more water during the episode or something because it is getting worse. Personal stuff, I am trying something a little bit different today. The last couple months, maybe year, I have been recording direct into Logic Pro X, and there have been buffer size issues where there will be random pops in the recording, regardless of what I set my buffer size to. So instead of recording in Logic Pro, I am today recording in Audio Hijack. I have two separate tracks for my microphone and my soundboard. Recording separately, I'll drop them in Logic afterwards and then do all the processing there. Hopefully, this will resolve that issue with random occasional pops. Drives me crazy. Secondly, just did the very first Geeks Rising live stream, podcast episode 1, where a bunch of the members of the Geeks Rising podcast network get together, talk about what they've been working on and what they've learned, and share insights into their content creation journey. It was super fun. I was so nervous. I have not done a live stream in forever, and I have reservations about my hosting ability, but I had fun with it. I think it turned out well. I will link it in the show notes. And to the last thing, this is just sharing some insight here. Last week's episode it performed a lot worse than typical. I think it's the number 10 video out of my last 10 released videos. The reason I'm sharing this is I think it's cool to see how important a consistent release schedule can be. Normally, the video is out by 8 o'clock EST, but last week it took so dang long, I don't think it was out until 1 a.m. EST. Therefore, a lot of that East Coast viewership and that EU viewership, they were all asleep. They weren't going to be able to watch it. So that had a direct impact on the performance, at least on YouTube. And I just thought I would share that with you. Something interesting, consistent release schedule where people know when your videos are coming out and when to check your channel can be very beneficial. But if you ever miss that schedule, it can harm the performance of that video or that show. That is going to do it. Got any questions? Send them to askbandrew@gmail.com. Share the show with a friend if you think they would get anything out of it. And I will talk to you all next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See ya.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer of Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.